Hi, my name is Bill. I live over at Renaissance in Wicker Park. I've lived here about 1 year and 3 months so far. I had undiagnosed depression. Problems built up in my life, and I started to drink. And the opportunities and options that I had originally had began to drift by the side, and I wasn't really aware of it. Then my mother got cancer, and there was a period of over a year where it was chemotherapy and surgery, and I could no longer attend to the work that I was doing. It was all centered on taking care of my mother. That's a photo of my mom when she has cancer. She was in the last stages of cancer there. And now here's a picture of what she actually looked like. That's her there. So she goes from that to that. She finally died, and by that time I was in a great deal of debt. I really couldn't find another job, although I did apply at 120 different places, but nobody was hiring. And I ended up living with my cousin then. My cousin took me in after about a year. Lived with my cousins for about a year, and eventually they were kind enough to let me stay there, but then I couldn't stay there with them permanently, and I just ended up being homeless. Initially, when I was homeless, I just slept on the street, and I slept on park benches, and then I'd sleep on the L. Eventually, I was introduced to the shelter system, and I did sleep in the different shelters. And I had many of the negative events that people talk about. Over the period of years, I had enough of the shelter system. I just felt safer sleeping on the street, and I ended up at the lakefront, and they were doing construction. So I would sleep at the construction site, especially during the winter when there really wasn't anybody there. And I ended up sleeping in a trash can. I'd turn the trash can on its side, and I'd have the lid of the trash can facing the wind, and then I would crawl inside. I couldn't pull my feet in far enough to actually close the trash can, so I would throw a plastic tarp over the whole thing. But there were times when it got down below zero, of course, and there were times when there would be snowstorms. You probably wonder why I have the footage. How come I have footage? What, you got enough money for a video camera? Yeah, well, I got hit by a car. I was crossing the street, and that car hit me dead on. I did get a settlement, and I put it in a bank, and then I said to myself, I got some money, but I had money before, and I rented an apartment, and I spent all my money renting an apartment, and I don't want to get stuck doing that again. I'd rather live on the streets. I talked to a friend of mine, and we were discussing how long people had been homeless. The person I was talking to, I had been homeless with him in a shelter 4 years before, and he actually got housing. And he said to me, well, how long have you been homeless? And I said, well, I've been homeless for 4 years. And he says, well, another 4 years, it'll be 8 years. And I said, yeah, I suppose. And I didn't think anything of my attitude. By the time I'd been homeless for 4 years, if somebody said, well, you're going to be homeless for 8 years, it was like, yeah, well, it makes sense. 4 and 4 equal 8, so I'll be homeless for 8 years. All right. Then it wasn't until later that I started thinking about it and thinking about When I first became homeless, like how terrified I was and how confused and how lost. And then I thought, man, what's the matter with me? I'm accepting being homeless now as my way of life.
Looks pretty small right now. It's not something I'd want to do anymore. I hope I don't ever have to go back to that situation. But that's what I did. That's how I got by.
I began to question myself as far as the way I was seeing things. I mean, I had been forced to learn to adapt. I got a link card and I learned how to eat at soup kitchens and which places served, and none of that stuff I wanted to do. I didn't want to do that. But after a while, you're forced into it and you learn how to do it, and I gradually just accepted it. And I became a member of Thresholds Peer Success. They did an intake of me and learned I'd been homeless for 4 years, and they said, oh, well, that's okay, we can get you into a shelter. And I said, no, that's okay, I've been in the shelters. I'll sleep in my trash can, thanks. And they said, well, there are options. And I said, well, okay, well, what are they other than shelters? And they said, well, we can try and help you get housing. One of the places they applied was Renaissance. I was accepted here, and I live at Renaissance in Wicker Park. RSSI helped me by getting me this apartment that I have, and it was not furnished, and they helped me get a bed. I have the social workers, Marco and Glenn, who are a great deal of help. They steered me in the right direction with a lot of things. Getting my life straightened out. It's not something that happens overnight. It's kind of a joke if you know anything about people who've been homeless. A lot of people, they get their apartment, they're there, they lock the door for the first time in 5 or 10 years, and they go to sleep on the floor. You can't help it. I went to sleep with all my clothes on for almost a month. You have things that happen to you that just, it becomes ingrained with you after a while. You can't just blossom overnight and get back to where you were. I remember about 3 weeks after I got housing, I was walking, and it started to rain, and I went under a viaduct, and I stopped, and I thought, oh, good, I can sleep here tonight. It won't rain on me here. And it's like, duh, you got an apartment. You can go back to your damn apartment. RSSI has helped me a great deal. They seem to have an understanding of what being homeless is like. So I just want to thank RSSI and say they're on the right track. Keep up the good work.